Whoa. Oh. Yeah. Oh, hitch. Collateral damage. Because of Eren Yeager. Oh. Yeah, this is about to happen. But isn't she meant to be in Stillhess? That's the location she crystallized in, right? And that big fight. Season 1 finale. Oh my god. This should be interesting. Hitch's reaction should be interesting. Oh. That shot though. Oh. What? She could hear all of that? Whoa, that changes things. Wow, imagine that. Okay. Just like back in season 1 or beginning of season 2. Wow. They did a number on Stillhess. Whoa. Love the detail there. Whoa. Alright, it's time. Ah. A foreigner. He does have darker skin. Come on, man, again. Another child being used. Oh! Of his homeland. It's tragic on both ends. Ah, that explains it. You're ready now. Right. Those elbows and knees, man, Muay Thai. But look at the, oh my goodness, the background. I was gonna say the value of life didn't mean much to her. That's the one. I've seen glimpses of this, right, since season 1. This part I knew, basically. That he regretted putting Annie into this situation. That's interesting. after that abusive relationship that she still had love for her father.
でもあんたが父親の元に帰っても
Wow.
瓦礫としたいしかないと思う。
Is that 2D or 3D? Whoa.
そうね。
地ならしが発動されたんだ。エレン・イエーガーが全ての命を奪いに来るぞ。あんたの家も神さんの実家も踏み潰されるんだよ。だから約束してくれ。帰ってくるって。
分かった。約束する。
It's interesting. Whoa. No. But it was off screen. Maybe a misdirect. Oh boy.
もう私の居場所はどこにもない。イエーガー派は民衆に支持され、この島の実権を握るだろう。私のような旧体制は払拭されるほかない。何があっても俺たちが教官を守ります。
Then you'll be targeted.
バカ者どもが。私が何のためにしょんべん小僧どもの足毛をおとなしく受けたと思っておるのだ。貴様らはイエーガー派に従い、決して背くな。せいぜいお前たちが守れるものは
Practical.
くらいだ。ただし、いつか立ち上がるべき日が来る。
An uprising.
決して自分を見失うな。
Wow. He shot us.
母さんを人間に戻すことを諦めろって言うの。言うよじゃないと神の信用を得られない。あの子が頼りだ。まだどこかに潜んでる。ライナーやシャリ
Armin's thinking
をおとなしくさせられるかどうか。
long term.
最悪なのはこの巨人の力をめぐって争い続けた2000年の歴史を繰り返すことだ。正直今すぐベッドに入って2日間程度眠りこけたいくらいには疲れてる。
Kind of like Reiner.
とにかく今できるだけのことをしなくち
Okay,
ゃ。
Armin.
こじんまりした今後の人類史に大きく影響
Now,
するだろ
Armin's
う。
thinking.
アルミン、私はどうしたらいいの？
Ah, Mikasa.
ジャンの手助けをしなよ。少しは自分で考えて。エレンのことどうするの？わからないよ。それにどうしようもないだろ。だからもうどうしようもないエレンのことなんか考える余裕はないよ。それくらいわかるだろ。ごめん。エルヴィン団長がこの場にいたらこんな無様に当たり散らしたりし。
Survivor's guilt coming in now.
生き返るべきだったのは僕じゃなかった。
Ugh. This is bound to happen at some point.
マフラーがない。
Louise probably took that, right? They showed her looking at it.
少年の命を引き換えにすることをコニーは深く考え、ためらん
She probably has it wrapped around her neck.
と間に合う。
ありがとう、ブラウスさん。
This is so
俺は
wholesome.
しばらくブラウスさんのところで世話になるよ。
And this.
元気でね。
Ah, Gabby. She stepped in for the hug.
さよなら、カピ。
Wow, look at this.
口の聞き方を間違えたらどうなるのかが。
Ah.
一体誰がお前にお山の大将を気取ってほしいと。
Wow, look at the Titans in the background.
聞いてくれたな、ジャン。
The ever-present.
みんな聞いてくれ。俺は10ヶ月前、エレンから今回の計画を聞いた。ジークを利用し、始祖の力をエレンが掌握する計画
Yeah,
だ。
yeah, as expected.
そしてお前たちは故郷をも失う。地ならしによって全ては巨大な足跡の下だ。
ふざけるなクソ野郎。誰がお前なんかに。
鉛玉に屈することなく義勇兵の誇りを貫いた。
This is a problem.
誇りに死ぬことはない。いいじゃないか、屈したって。こんな死に方するより生きてた方が。
It's not much of a choice though, man.
じゃん、何
Jean and Mikasa are gonna have to deal with this.
さっきの質問だが、俺はエレンの代弁者だ。エレンが島の外の問題を完全解決するなら。
He thinks he's solving the problems inside.
島の中の遺恨を完全に消し去る。
I mean, he's a tool for Eren.
俺たちは4年前、あの地獄を生き残ってようやくこれを手にしたんだ。
Freedom.
これが何かわかるか？ 自由だよ。もうお前らは戦わなくていい。好きに生きていい。
Oh man, Floch.
お前は憲兵になって内地で快適に暮らしたかったんだろ。そうしろよ。お前は
That was a long time ago, man. This is not the same Jean.
終わった。だからもう昔のジャンに戻れよ。いい加減でムカつく生意気な
No,
野郎。
that Jean's gone.
フロックリヴァイ兵士長とハンジ団長はどうし
Oh,
た
I like this tone Mikasa's taking.
コニーさん、
Whoa, that flew
助けて
by.
もらってありがたいんですが、ずっと北に進んでますよね。ほら、夕日があっちに。
いいんだよ。
Oh,
危険な南から離れた方が。
ありがとうございます、コニーさん。俺一人のためにここまでしてくれるなんて。
Floch was so pure, man.
いいんだ。
それに、コニーさん、俺はどこかで
You
見た
have?
ことある気がするんだけど。
Wow, that was great. That was a great touch to have the ending playing over that scene.
なすすべがありません
I'm sure
あれを止める策は何か終わりでしょうか
Armin's thinking of it.
ない。ただ最後までみっともなくもがく。
Whoa! She could do that?
とりあえず食べないでこちらには何の武器もありませんえあっちに誰かいるご安心くださいあれは人畜無害の心底ないです
Harmless fellow who refuses to die. All right, folks. That is quite the pleasant surprise. Of course, super happy to see Hanji-san and Levi Heicho. And of course, Magath and Peak. So yeah, that was a fantastic post episode or post credit scene. Certainly caught me by surprise. But you see that the makings of a potential coming together are certainly there now, right? It was kind of there in the last episode as well, but this episode for sure, right? It became really clear that okay, it's heading towards that. But before I go any further, Heicho looks to be in stable condition. The resourceful Hanji-san got him bandaged up somehow, so that's good to see. But yeah, I'm not expecting Heicho to, all of a sudden recover and come back in. I mean, he's going to be on the sidelines for a long time, right? So yeah, I'm just happy to see him. I'm just happy to see a glimpse of him and Hanji as well, of course. And the thing to note here is this is the goofy Hanji, right? A rare glimpse, a rare sighting of the goofy Hanji, right? From the earlier seasons. So I've missed that. Though I did see the goofy Hanji in season 4, part 1 as well, right? Nicolo-kun. So yeah, it was certainly a pleasant surprise. And how about Peak controlling the card titan, right? I mean, Peak is really quite impressive, right? She's got absolute control of this titan, this mech flesh, essentially, right? And yeah, this is a big moment. This is a monumental moment because now this sets this up for a talk-out phase, right? There's a lot to be discussed. Of course, Hanji is not going to be down for this. Of course she's not going to be down for this. The things that are happening now, the things that are at play now, the apocalyptic, Stampede of the Titans, the rumbling. Of course she's not going to be down for this. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see the dynamic here, right? The back and forth. You've got representatives, high-ranking representatives from both sides, but in this sense, there's not really both sides anymore, is there? Now it's just this new side that needs to kind of come together, right? So yeah, it'll be really cool. I'm really excited. That's how you hype up the next episode, man. That is quite the cliffhanger because essentially these characters are in leadership positions, right? Magath and Peak, and then you have Hanji here. Maybe Heicho might come too at some point. Maybe he can speak at least at some point, even though he's not going to be able to enter the field anytime soon or at all, really, to be honest. I don't know how he's going to manage that. Unless there's a bit of a time skip, maybe? I don't know. And then, of course, if these leaders can kind of, reconcile, then you have some of these other characters, right? Like Armin mentioned, the card and Reiner, the armored titan. Now Annie is in there as well, right? The female titan. And of course, on the other side, you have, our scouts, our iconic scouts. Jean, Mikasa, Connie, hopefully, and Armin, of course. And then you have Falco there too, right? Early days, but Falco is the new Jaw Titan. Sooner or later, he's going to transform. I mean, the setup has been there since season 4, episode 1, right? Falco was destined to become a Titan. So of course, that possibility is certainly there. That exciting possibility. A look at Falco's Jaw Titan. Of course, that is going to come into play. Now that, that's all assuming that Connie doesn't go through with this plan of his at this moment in time, right? Connie is a bit jaded at the moment, a bit unhinged at the moment. That scene right before the post-credit scene, I thought that was, wow, that was quite a poignant scene, having it play out as the credits roll and the ending theme kicking in, right? Those rare moments of the ending theme kicking in as a scene is playing out, that's one of my favorite moments of Shingeki, right? They did that a few times in part 1 of season 4, one of the most memorable and one of the most fulfilling ones, and one of the most emotional ones was, the fair. As Reiner is kind of dragging Gabby back home after she's kind of had a bit too much and she has a bit of a stomachache. I'll never forget that moment. I'll never forget that moment of that incredible, beautiful ending, kind of slowly seeping in to that scene, right? Wow, what a moment to think back to. And of course, they did that for, Gabby, Kaya, and Falco as well, as Kaya is thinking back to her big sister. Sasha. I forgot the name for a second. So yeah, I love it. It's always such a fantastic directing choice. And speaking of directing, I thought this episode was fantastically directed. And of course, speaking of directing, the pacing is really quite effective here, right? It's a deliberate slow burn, right? A slower pace. And it really allows, it really allowed this deep dive into the current state of mind for a lot of these characters, a lot of introspection, how they're dealing with the aftermath of all of this. There's a lot of anguish. It's a guilt-ridden episode, isn't it? Top to bottom. Because, ultimately, as of this point, Paradis is kind of, there's nothing there, right? There's no, in terms of an outside threat, that, they're safe from that. Right? Of course, there's a totally other side to that. There's internal threat. There's internal conflict. And, it's up front and center in this episode. As expected, there was always going to be this divide. But as of this point, the external threat, the outside world, is at bay, right? It's at their mercy. It's at Eren Yeager and the Colossal Titan's mercy, right? So now it's up to the characters. It's up to the people, right? People in positions of power. It's up to them to, make the next move. They could leave it as is, and the world just kind of burns to ashes outside. And also, there's that whole parallel to Keith Shot is mentioning that about Eren, he give up his life and burn to ashes outside the walls. And then, of course, the ending of this season 4, part 2, has imagery, really poignant imagery and quite unmissable imagery right at the end as Eren does kind of, burn into ashes almost outside the wall. Even the ending itself has a lot of foreshadowing, doesn't it? But it's up to these characters now to come together and take a stance and try to put an end to this, try to bring this to a halt. But then, of course, you have another side to all of this, the ones that think this is it, they've won, right? All that sacrifice, all the hell they've been through, all of that was for this, right? You see that they show us people on the ground level, and I'm speaking of unnamed characters, kind of like red shirts, but it's important. It was important to show that side of it too, right? That there is a divide, even beyond Floch and his Jaegerists. The civilians, the public, essentially everyone is a devil in someone's eyes, right? At this point in time, every single character and a group is culpable. And, that's one of the things that makes this story so incredible. Yes, some things you could kind of take one side over the other, especially in this case, given the things that are at play now. But, that being said, some of these people, they depend on people like Eren or the Jaegerists to, protect them essentially from these outside threats. And some of them are quite grateful for that. They're embracing it. They understand that sacrifices had to be made, but they're quite thankful that there are people out there that are looking out for Paradis and the people of Paradis, right? Of course, there's a divide there because they also showed us the collateral damage. As expected, a lot of people died, right? As the Wall Titans commenced their march. So yeah, there's two sides to this. Some actually feel like, okay, some of that sacrifice was necessary, right, for the greater good. And again, I think it was important to show us some of these civilians and their thought process. Some of them, that one guy, he's not wrong, essentially, right, in his thought process that if this wasn't done, the rest of the world was going to come for them, right? So imagine from a civilian's perspective, right? You could understand their loyalty or their appreciation for Eren Yeager, right? And the Jaegerists as well, in that sense, Floch as well. It's a matter of perspective. It really is. I'll get to Floch in a bit. It's time to take a bit of a deep dive into Floch and the individual, the character he's become, and kind of the character development. I mean, it's a fantastic character arc, no doubt about it. I don't think anyone can argue against that. It's a phenomenal character arc, really. The character development is just top notch. But yeah, before I get into some of the characters and the focus on these characters, and there's quite a bit of that. And I loved how a lot of the episode, or a chunk of that episode, was kind of like a two-hander, right? You've got Annie and Hitch together once again. But yeah, I'll get into that in a bit, in that backstory. But the episode as a whole, again, like I mentioned, great directing on display. I love the. I mean, it's kind of strange to say this, but I do love the imagery of the rumbling. It has this dark beauty about it, especially in its presentation, right? Be it from below, right? Or be it from above, be it on a level. There's a lot of different perspectives of the rumbling and how it's affecting all the people that are still on Paradis, right? And, in that sense, I saw the opening. And there I actually get to see the rumbling on display in other places. Now, I'm not sure if those are actually actual frames or actual scenes taken from future episodes and kind of, put into the opening. But, the devastation is certainly on display, and you see the immense size of these colossal titans. It is absolute devastation, annihilation. Nothing is surviving that, right? Nothing's going to survive this. Like I mentioned in the last episode, right, the devastating damage this is going to cause, right, beyond just humanity outside the walls, but to the ecosystem, right, to the planet as a whole, and how it functions beyond, the rumbling. In the opening, you actually see a lot of the Marley Eldians, right, because they have the armbands. So yeah, bit of a preview of what's to come. Again, who knows, right? At this point, who knows if it's going to be a film or if it is going to be a part 3, but, maybe a preview. Though, maybe that is going to be in these next 5 episodes at some point, right? I'm at episode 7 now, so 5 episodes left. Maybe by the end of it could be, I could see some of the imagery from the opening, right? I mean, it's some haunting imagery, folks. And that was one of the points I was going to bring up, but then, I saw the opening, and it kind of gave me a bit of the thing I was asking for. Again, it's kind of strange to say this, because other than Marley and Liberio, there just hasn't been much time to explore the outside world, right? And how it's going to affect. I mean, you can kind of imagine it, how it's going to affect, and the opening certainly gives you a visual representation of it. But, I felt like, I felt like that, maybe, there's probably just not enough time for this anymore. I mean, it's too late at this point because the rumbling has begun. The Stampede of the Titans is set into motion. It could have been beneficial to see our own characters, the protagonists of this story, of this narrative, interact with others outside of. I mean, I guess I've seen the Azumabitos, right? But again, they came to parody, right? And again, there's a name drop. The Azumabitos, as Armin is kind of having a bit of a breakdown. And, in that sense, I thought it was crucial that they mention Azumabitos once again, because, if you go back to season 4, part 1, they established that there is this flying craft, the first of its kind, using the iceberg stone, right? So, yeah, if they can get to him, they'll certainly get to check out the rumbling in its glory, right? This isn't the scale they were expecting back then, right? This isn't the scale Azumabito was expecting, but yeah, they might need to make use of those. Let's see if those come into play at some point. I mean, surely they might come into play, right? As they are flying boats. They called it flying boats, right? So yeah, it was crucial to mention that again. They mentioned Historia again, that she might not be safe. But circling back to my initial point, yes, of course, a lot of these characters are really against this, right? The outside world having to pay this kind of price. But, I think it would have been beneficial to see them actually interact or learn more about the outside world specifically, right? Specific places, other than maybe, Liberio and Marley. Though, they certainly go to Marley, right? All of them actually did leave Paradis. So yeah, I guess they do have a perspective. Much like Eren. If Eren himself was saying that he understands that there's a lot of the same things going on here, even outside of Paradis, that he understands that everyone has a struggle, everyone has their own struggle, that not everyone is out to get, the island devils or the Paradis. He understands, right? So, of course, some of these other characters also understand then. But yeah, perhaps it's a bit too late in the story at this point. But yeah, I guess it's one of those things that you kind of just infer. And then, of course, there's Yelena and Anya Capone, who might have filled them in and told them or taught them about the outside world and how things are. I just wish I kind of got to see a bit more of that. Maybe even one episode or a segment in one episode, and maybe even part 1. I think part 1 would have been a good point to do that, right? But yeah, original point, the rumbling, the imagery. Yeah, I've got to say, there's a dark beauty about it. There really is. It kind of reminds me of Hannibal. For those who've seen Hannibal, you know that the cinematography, the photography of it has this really dark, haunting beauty about it. That's the same type of feeling I get from this, right? There's that one shot. Holy shit, folks. It's a jaw dropper. It's going to be my thumbnail. 100%. You see the sun in the background, and you see all of this red that just dominates the framing of a lot of these shots, right? And you see the Colossal Titans. And, speaking of the Colossal Titans, I appreciate and I love how they're so detailed. The facial features are so detailed and they're so unique to each one of the Colossal Titans they put on camera, essentially, right? It doesn't feel like it's just a 3D carbon copy, the same thing kind of multiplied over and over. There's a lot of detail here. And like I mentioned in the last episode, a lot of them have this really mean look to them. But yeah, I've got to say, this is some of the most stunning and memorable and, jaw-dropping and poignant apocalyptic imagery I've seen in anything, right? All that time ago, it was just this slim, notion and thought in my mind. What if even a small percentage or a small chunk of these Colossal Titans get out of those walls? You go back to, the post-credit scene of season 1, episode 25, right? Just the notion of one Titan was just, mind-blowing. So all this time later to see the march of these Titans, the Colossal Titans, is just mind-blowing. It is kind of just insane. And in that sense, it's really quite jarring for a character like Annie, right? Who's experiencing it for the first time to see the March of the Titans in person. Imagine that. Imagine seeing that, right? After all that time. Though, of course, one of the big revelations of this was that Annie was actually cognizant of a lot of the things that are going on around her. That, that clears up any notion of her having to be filled in, right? about the things that have played out in these last 4 years. So, I thought that was really clever in that sense. But yeah, she's been in there, though that in itself is a bit of a nightmare, folks. That is just insane. Imagine if she didn't get out of that situation, if she did spend the rest of her life stuck in that. That is, wow. that is maybe even worse than death, really. Being stuck in this dreamlike state that you can never really come out of. But in that sense, Annie was in such a unique situation, right? She actually had so much time for a lot of, self-time, alone time, introspection, to really think all of these things over, her trajectory and the things she's done, and the things she might do if she was ever to get out of here. Right, again, through Hitch and Armin and their conversations, they've been kept up to date. And of course, they established that Hitch goes down there all the time, right? Be it for superfluous conversation about men or other things, important things that kind of helped Annie stay up to date. In that sense, she was in quite a unique situation, because a lot of these characters, they were forced into making a lot of reactionary decisions, right? At a moment's notice, things kind of go to shit and they had to react to it. And a lot of times it's not the right move. But Annie's had a lot of time to think about these things, and in that sense, you think of Annie being in there and that being kind of like a nightmare. Now compare that to the Fenrir Ymir, right, in the Path Realm. Yeah, that's once again a different type of nightmare entirely. And of course, there is a confirmation here that indeed Annie didn't age, right? So she's actually still the same age she was 4 years ago in that sense. Physically, she's the same as well. The hair didn't grow. So that might be a bit strange for Annie at first, that everyone's grown 4 years since she last saw many of them. So yeah, in that sense, she knows about Bertold, because, they established that Armin also had a lot of one-on-ones, a lot of one-on-one conversations, just putting his feelings out there. So, that reunion, and that reunion might be really soon, promises to be quite interesting, quite exciting even. I'm really excited to see how both of them react to each other, right? Seeing each other. Yeah, that promises to be quite an exciting prospect. And, in that sense, you see that Armin and Gabby are heading towards Connie. And, that in itself also presents quite a unique combination, right? Armin and Gabby. But before I forget about Connie, that final scene, man, that flashback. I mean, it's a lovely flashback of his family, right? And again, I see his father, who I saw as a Titan in season 2. And then, of course, I've seen his mother as a Titan. And of course, I think I have seen his siblings as Titans as well, right? In the Utgard Castle arc. But yeah, you see his father. But, the thing there that Connie is kind of thinking back to is, his mother saying, become a soldier that protects people or protects everyone or can protect everyone, right? He is thinking back to the things his mother had hoped for him. You see that he is struggling. He is having this internal conflict, this internal battle with this decision he's trying to make here or about to make here. As the fantastic Mr. Browse mentioned, yes, Connie is going to think about this, a lot before he actually goes through with this, right? He is going to come to his senses and realize, okay, think about, what I'm trying to do here. And as expected, right? Of course, Connie's going to struggle with this. And I don't expect this to happen at all. I think he is going to snap out of it. He is going to come to the right conclusion. He is going to realize that, okay, he had a bit of a moment. As Mikasa told Armin, are you going to tell him to give up on his mother? Are you really going to tell him to, move on from that? And of course, the fact that Falco has come too is going to make this really difficult for Connie as well, right? Because you have someone so pure and so wholesome here in Falco thanking Connie, right, for helping him. So of course, all of these things are going to, play out in his mind. And speaking of Falco, yeah, as it's been established throughout the series, you lose your memory after, kind of becoming a Titan shifter. He remembers Colt, RIP, and Gabby, but then after that, he doesn't remember anything. So yeah, let's see, man, how Falco comes into this. And, as a Titan shifter and as a trained warrior, I believe he is going to come into this for sure. And, he mentioned that, he recognizes Connie. It could be a few things, right? It could be I mean, he legitimately saw Connie on the blimp, right? On the airship as Gabby shot Sasha. Connie was there, right? So he saw him there, and also maybe through memories, right? Now that he has the Jaw Titan, maybe some of Ymir's memories are leaking through, right? And he kind of saw Connie there. Maybe from Utgard Castle, you know. There's a lot of great moments of Connie and Ymir. That was one of my favorite dynamics, actually. Connie and Ymir together. You know, it was like a brother-sister type relationship. Really enjoyed that. Damn it, man. I really enjoyed season 2, especially the Utgard Castle arc. Easily one of my favorite parts of Shingeki. And I really hope to go back to that really soon. And you see that through Connie, there's a bit of a disillusionment arc at play. You know, a bit of a mini disillusionment arc, but it is there. You know, it is there. And, you know, speaking of character arcs, there's also a full-out corruption arc on display at this moment in time. And like I mentioned earlier, man, it is a fantastic character arc, right? And I'm speaking of Floch at this point. It's fantastic character development. It's a fantastic character arc. It's a corruption arc, no doubt about it. There is no doubt about it that it is a corruption arc. But it is a damn good arc. Listen, you know, I don't like the person Floch has become. No, of course not. You know, he's let power really affect him. It's gone to his head. He's misusing it, essentially, right? He's using it to subjugate people. He's drunk on it. It always goes back to that notion, right? Everyone's drunk on something, and at this moment in time, Floch is drunk on power, right? And yeah, you know, he's misusing it. But let's get into it, right? Floch and this character arc of his, the corruption arc, essentially. But, you know, you see that he's been so affected by his PTSD, his past trauma, that he decided never again, that he would never allow anyone to put him in that position ever again, right? The hell he faced. You know, I really appreciated the growth and the development for Floch in season 3, part 2, right? As he kind of came out really a changed individual, right? Again, survived hell, experienced hell and survived it. He was able to kind of, you know, stand up for the fodder and kind of call out the main character's out of line behavior. I really appreciated that perspective, right? It was needed. But of course, since then, slowly it's kind of, it's really gone down that corruption arc path. Back then, you see that this is an individual who could be good, who had goodness in him, right? But after all of his experiences, you see now that he's embraced the darkness, right? He's embraced the chaos. So of course, you know, there's certainly quite a bit to appreciate about Floch and how he turned this all around for himself, right? From being this victim, essentially, to someone who took control of his life, right? And he rose to a prominent position, right? Even though, again, I'll get to that in a bit. But, you know, if you look at it from that perspective, yeah, you know, he did this, right? He managed all of this. So yeah, of course, there's a lot to appreciate about Floch and his rise, you know, and his decision to not be a victim anymore, right? He made it happen. He made this happen. But that being said, you know, as depicted in this episode as well, he's kind of gone too far to that side now, right? He's kind of gone off the deep end. And yeah, you know, I mean, you see that fascism is certainly trending in Paradis, right? You see that there's extremists, there is forcible suppression of opposition, you know, there's mass propaganda, there's true believers, cult followings, right? It's all trending towards a totalitarian rule. Some of his techniques and his methods and how he's handling these situations is the opposite of Eren, right? He's out here kind of trying to subjugate people. Eren is the complete opposite of that, right? If Eren was here right now, he would not be down for it. And of course, you know, in that sense, yeah, it kind of came full circle. I remember I brought this up in season 3, part 1, or sorry, not season 3, season 4, part 1, that he, you know, to get someone like Floch on his side, he had to tell him. He had to be a bit more upfront to him than anyone else, essentially. Because if he told Floch that, oh yeah, he's doing Yelena and Zeke's plan, no chance in hell, right? You know, Floch is all about Paradis and the Eldian Empire, but there's got to be so much that Eren has not shared with Floch, right? he's only shared the things Floch needed to know. You know, Floch was made to feel quite special, right? And you see that he's really flexing that now, right? That he represents Eren here on Paradis, right? Eren's taking care of the outside problems, and I'm taking care of anything that happens on the inside. I'm keeping everything in line for Eren. And again, you know, I was speaking of this trending towards a totalitarian regime, right? And again, you know, you have characters, old heads like Keith Shadis, who's a hero. You know, Keith Shadis is a hero of Paradis. You see that he's still looking out for these cadets. He's telling them, he's giving them sound advice on how to handle this situation, right? He's looking out for them, right? He's not looking out for himself. He's almost accepted that sooner or later he is going to, you know, face death, right? Pay the ultimate price. So yeah, you know, Keith Shadis, I'm loving this, you know, late, but much needed and much deserved focus on Keith Shadis, right? I think he's a fantastic character, limited appearance character, and I'm loving all the focus on Keith Shadis, and I hope there's more to come. And you know, the most telling part of this, the most telling line of dialogue here is, "What's wrong to live in submission?" Again, the opposite of Eren Yeager. Yes, you know, I know people might argue that, okay, he is giving them a choice, but it's not much of a choice though, right? I mean, at this point in time, I think it's tough to argue against the notion that Floch has become a full-blown fascist, right? And he is initiating a totalitarian rule or regime, right? A fascist regime, you know, enforcing that rule of terror, right? But I think through the character of Floch, you see a glimpse into a very real facet of humanity, right, on display. You know, this isn't fantasy. This is recognizable, right? This behavior, this type of individual, the things they kind of believe in, or how they carry themselves, or how they go about establishing or accomplishing their goals. Yeah, there's examples of this, right? I think that's the point of this, clearly. There's also that notion that sometimes, you know, people need bad men to keep other bad men from the door. I think Floch has been quite an effective plot device character, right? He's been integral in conveying some of these messages and themes, right? And, you know, in that sense, Isayama-san has such an eye for contradiction, as most great writers do, right? One of the things, I guess maybe you could call it a spoiler, or I don't know, but you know, I've seen a lot of, you know, usernames, you know, King Floch or Based Floch or Goated Floch, right? So I know Floch has quite a fan base. Maybe that's a little bit concerning in that sense, but you know, I also understand that people appreciate the character growth, because I certainly appreciate the character growth, the character development. And, you know, I can see how people might appreciate the things he's doing for the place he loves, right? His country, his home. But I don't think you can really argue. I don't think there's really much argument against him being a fascist, essentially, at this point in time. He has gone off the deep end, right? The power has gone to his head. The thing is, even though he is in a position of power, some of his actions, or a lot of his actions, are that of a coward, essentially. I think so. You know, I mentioned a lot of these things that are kind of, you know, trending towards fascism. You know, you go back to season 4, part 1, you know, him having these cadets, or, you know, forcibly having Keith Shadis, someone of the old guard, beaten, right? Again, forcible suppression of opposition, right? And in this sense, it was the old guard, Keith Shadis. He had those cadets beat him, right? And Keith Shadis, of course, as an old head, he's intelligent enough to know he had to let him do it, right? Otherwise, all of them are dead. Keith Shadis and the cadets. So yeah, you know, Keith Shadis knew even back then. It's, you know, it's trending towards that type of rule. But there is that perspective, right? That the world at large is coming to destroy them and their home, right? So, you know, who's to tell them that they cannot defend themselves? That's one thing, right? That's one thing. But the way Floch is going about it now, the individual he's become, you know, in this corruption arc, you know, you can't really defend that. All of that being said, it's a fantastic character. It's a fantastic character arc. It is fantastic character development. And then you have characters like Jean and Mikasa who might have to kind of face this problem, right? Or handle this problem, or come face to face with this problem. Because, you know, yes, Jean is quite conflicted. There's a lot of emotions running through his mind, but no, of course, Jean is a changed individual. He's not going to stand for this. He doesn't stand for the things Aaron's put into motion. So sooner or later, yeah, there's going to be a clash here at some point. And you see Mikasa's not really happy at the moment. She asked about Hanji and Hiecho. So yeah, let's see how that plays out. There's a really great moment as Anya Capone walks by and looks at Jean and they make eye contact. Yeah, that look of, that all-knowing look of, this is a slippery path or this is a slippery road, right? Or slope. And Jean knows, he understands. And I thought a lot of the facial animation was quite good in this episode, top notch. And speaking of Mikasa, it's heartbreaking, isn't it? Mikasa and Armin this episode, you see that she's quite conflicted, she's quite isolated at the moment. That scene, man, Armin and Mikasa, and Armin especially, you see how conflicted he is and how just heartbreaking it is to see them kind of go through this, right? You see just how heartbroken Armin is about the situation, that he wasn't able to, help his friend. He wasn't able to come to Aaron's aid, and look at the path he's on now. Look at the things he's initiated and put into motion now. And, he's got a billion things on his mind, and he kind of has this breakdown. There's a lack of sleep, and he kind of, snaps at Mikasa, and he regrets it instantly, but then you see the survivor's guilt kind of coming in, right? Now he's in that position that he's starting to think, okay, maybe, I wasn't the right choice here, I wasn't able to help out here. He can't help but always kind of compare himself to Commander Smith, because in his mind, that notion of him being picked over Commander Smith is there. It's always there. And at this moment in time, he firmly believes they made the wrong choice, right? But, I have belief. I have belief in Armin. Aaron had belief in Armin all that time ago. Aaron said Armin is going to save us all, right? He is going to save humanity. And, little did Aaron know at that point, but, it might be Armin saving humanity from Aaron. You see that Armin is thinking of this plan, right? Of bringing a collection of people together. That it's time to put aside this notion of condemning each other's differences, and that instead, it's perhaps time to embrace the things that make them alike, right? So you see that Armin is thinking of that, and he believes that Gabby is the key to this, right? He cannot have Connie do this to Falco, because then that upsets that potential coming together, right? And kind of continues that cycle of hatred and violence, as he mentioned to both Jean and Connie on the rooftop. So yeah, Armin is certainly quite conflicted and down on himself, but I believe Armin is going to come clutch. I believe so. That's how I see it at this point in time. And lastly, let's go to Annie, right? The reintroduction of Annie back into Shingeki at a crucial point in the story. In that sense, her female titan, could be quite useful. But yeah, I've got to say, maybe this is the first time a backstory hasn't quite hit, like some of the other backstories I've seen in this show, in Shingeki. Maybe that's because of the timing of it. Maybe it just kind of came too late in the game, but I don't know. It just didn't feel like the usual backstory to me, or didn't quite have the same gravitas as some of the other backstories. You see that a lot of this, detachment comes from her childhood, right? From her father. He's not her biological father, but her father nonetheless. And you see at one point, she does accept that this is my father, because that father does accept her as a daughter, right? He regrets his actions. He regrets using Annie as a tool to, better his life. But, I mentioned that it's tragic on both ends. Yes, Annie's being used, right? As a tool, as a child soldier, being developed into a child soldier, so he could have a better life. He's put into this situation, right, in Liberio, in these camps. So that in itself is such a incredibly harsh and shitty situation to begin with. So now, it kind of creates this cycle. But yeah, like I was mentioning, because of the mistreatment and the lack of love in her upbringing, she kind of became detached to everyone, essentially. Including herself. The value of life didn't mean anything to her, because her own life didn't mean anything to her. Though, of course, upon departure, yeah, there was that light, right, of her father kind of accepting all the mistakes he made, and just wanting her to come back. I mean, in that sense, like I mentioned, and as you saw, I was a bit surprised that she was so moved by this, because her father really mistreated her. He really did. It's quite a sad upbringing. You know, in that sense, I was a bit, surprised to see that she was able to kind of, have that emotional connection or emotional reaction to her father right at the end, right before she was about to leave, right? But then, of course, you go back to the forest of the giant trees after Heicho defeats her, and she's kind of leaning up against that tree. You see how emotional she was at that point in time as well. It's not for me to decide if Annie should be forgiving her father, right? Again, yes, it's a fictional character, but still, it's not for anyone else to decide. Maybe it really moved her that she finally had a connection, right, with this individual that really kind of accepted her as his own, right? She was abandoned. So maybe that moved her, right? At the end, that yes, this is my father. He loves me, right? He came around and he accepted me as his own. So yeah, everyone wants to belong. Everyone wants to be loved. So she did a lot of this, or all of this, to get back to her father. And there's not a lot of empathy for Annie at this moment in time. There's not really that much sympathy given her actions, and of course Annie herself believes these are irredeemable actions, unforgivable actions. So I don't personally have much sympathy for Annie in that sense, but the fact that she does realize and understands that her actions have been quite unforgivable, regrettable, right, irredeemable, that's a start for sure, right? That's all she can really do at this point, right? Except that she's made a lot of mistakes. And at this point in time in this story, there's a lot of that. A lot of these characters accept that they've made a lot of mistakes. They've done a lot of terrible things, but they regret those actions that they made, right? You go back to season 1, the female Titan arc, she was toying with the lives of a lot of these people. But yeah, there is some trauma there. There is this detachment from the value of human life really early on, in her upbringing, in her growth, and that really affected her. But yeah, I think that's about it for this episode. Also, I should mention, once again, the incredible score. I love the selection of music here. A lot of, memorable tracks from past seasons are used to perfection here. A lot of recognizable and iconic tracks are used here. And earlier I mentioned the opening. I finally watched it. I mean, it's a great opening. I mean, the animation in that opening is just phenomenal, actually. It really is quite impressive. But I do want to check it out once again with subtitles. I mean, the lyrics are in English, but again, there's a few things I kind of missed because I was kind of, concentrating on the imagery as well. There's quite a bit of imagery there. A lot of unique and interesting imagery on display. One of the things that was really kind of standing out to me was Aaron's trek on top of the walls, and you see the birds surrounding him as he's moving, right? But yeah, I do want to check it out again with subtitles and give some detailed thoughts on that. But I'm not going to do a frame by frame. I believe I was told not to go frame by frame. So yeah, I'm just going to watch it through without kind of pausing too much. But yeah, I do need the subtitles for that. Right then, I think that's about it for this one. If you enjoyed that, consider dropping a like, consider dropping some comments, give me your thoughts. If you're interested in full opacity, or maybe even full length, consider checking out the Patreon page. The link is in the description, in the pinned comment. Also, there's a link to my social media, Twitter, if you're into that, so consider checking that out. Right then, thank you for joining me for this one, and I hope to see you again soon for the next one. Until then, take it easy.